Good Friday morning. Today's proverb is one of the most familiar proverbs to any parent that has raised their kids in church. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. One way people read this passage is as a promise that if you teach your children about God, they will be faithful to Him in adulthood. And sadly, this has caused a lot of pain and sorrow for parents whose children have left the faith. They wonder, didn't I train them in the way they should go? Is this my fault? Or worse yet, they wonder why God broke His promise. Trying to move away from that interpretation, many have suggested that the phrase, the way he should go, is specific to each individual child. In other words, train the child to embrace his or her own unique gifts and talents. Find the path that God has for him or her as an individual. After examining the words and phrases of the passage, it seems to me that both of these interpretations kind of miss the mark. First of all, the book of Proverbs, it's not a book of promises. You can't read this book as saying, if you do X, then God must do Y. It's really a book of wise sayings, phrases that are pithy and memorable. And when taken as a whole, these proverbs help God's people, especially young people, develop a heartfelt appreciation for wise, righteous, and godly living. Each proverb captures a particular truth about wise living and expresses it in a poetic form. Now, obviously, no single proverb can exhaust the subject it addresses, and it isn't trying to do so. Each proverb is simply saying, if you remember and live by faith, then you and the people around you will have a better life. Proverbs 22:6 begins with the Hebrew word hanak that appears in 3 other verses in the Old Testament. Interestingly, every other time this word is used, it's not translated train up, rather it's translated dedicate. It means get something started, initiate something. So the first part of the proverb is about starting a child off in a certain direction. The next phrase, it's interesting as well. The word should doesn't actually appear in the original Hebrew. The phrase literally says, in his way. Train in his way. The Hebrew word for way, well, that one appears 69 times in the book of Proverbs. And it can be used to describe the way of the wicked and the way of the righteous. Essentially, it's a road or a path metaphor that simply describes the journey of life. So what does that mean? Well, if you take all this information, the literal reading of Proverbs 22:6 would read something like, initiate a child on his path, and even when he's old, he won't depart from it. It seems to simply mean we are set on a path as children, and that path that we're set on, we seldom deviate from. This proverb could be a warning. It could warn me as a parent, if I allow my child to follow the way that seems right to them, I'm going to have a hard time getting them on the path that they should be on as adults. After all, the path that children are naturally inclined to follow is a path of foolishness, and it takes discipline to keep children from going down that path. On the other hand, it could be an encouragement to initiate children on the path of holiness, righteousness, wisdom when they're very young. In other words, get a child started on a path of doing right when they're young, and it's going to be harder to get them off that path when they're old. And even another possibility is that this proverb is intentionally ambiguous in order to highlight the malleability of children and the challenge of getting adults to change their ways once they are on a particular path. Either way, there's a lot of wisdom in this one little phrase, and God's people would do well to think about it and apply it to our lives. Lord, the more I learn, the more I realize I do not know. How many parents are beating themselves up because the kids who never missed a day at church are now 1,000,000 miles from you? God, give those parents hope that God, give those parents hope that while we know it's so hard to teach older people new things, with you, all things are possible. Amen. This is the day the Lord has made. Rejoice. Be glad in it. I'll see you tomorrow.